Welcome back, investors. Jake here. Currently, we're on day 6 of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and it's really not going well for Russia. And when we check in with the US stock market, currently all of the indexes are red, but the S&P is only down about 0.7%. Given all of the dramatic news that broke over the weekend, this is a pretty good sign for the US stock market. However, I can't say the same thing for the Russian stock market or the Russian economy. That's what I want to focus on in this video. But first, let's just reflect on, once again, this is day 6 of this invasion of Ukraine, and Russia has achieved none of their military objectives. The government in Kyiv is still in place. Most of the Ukrainian military is on the eastern side of the country, and they're still fighting. Russia has complete air superiority, but you can go on social media and see video of Russian planes and helicopters being shot down, Russian tanks being destroyed, Russian soldiers surrendering, stating they don't know why they're here. They were told this was all part of the exercise and they weren't going into an active combat zone. So Russian leadership thought Ukraine was going to surrender. The military was going to stand down. The government was going to flee Kiev. They were not prepared for a protracted insurgency or war in the country. And when we talk about Russia's economy, it's important to remember how small it is. Their GDP is only about 1.4 trillion. It's smaller than Italy and slightly larger than Spain. So the mistake that the Soviet Union made 30 years ago was they bankrupted themselves trying to compete with military spending and the United States. And here we are, almost 30 years later, and really Russia is doing it again. Russia has made the mistake of neglecting their economy. Here is the index fund that tracks the Russian stock market, basically. And their stock market peaked in 2008, and here we are 14 years later, and it hasn't recovered. If you were an investor in the Russian stock market, you've seen a 50% decline over the last 4 months. So as China and the United States continue to successfully grow their economy almost exponentially, Russia is being left behind. And you could argue that the sanctions that the West put on them for seizing Crimea in 2014 had a big part to play in the last 8 years and them stumbling. But Russia prepared for this, or at least they thought they did. So here's an article titled, "Sanctions Will Put Russia's Fortress Economy to the Test." So since 2014, when the United States and Western allies imposed sanctions on Moscow following the annexation of Crimea, the downing of this Malaysian Air Flight 17, Russia's president has been trying to build an economy capable of withstanding much tougher penalties. Putin for 8 years has been planning this invasion of Ukraine, and he's been trying to protect himself economically, preparing for what the West was going to do. However, it's not working. So much for that sanctions-proof Russian economy. Clearly, the Russian economy wasn't as immune to financial pressure as Putin thought. As laid out in this morning Jolt, the ruble is collapsing. The Moscow stock market remains closed. So here we are on Monday, and the government wouldn't allow the stock market to open, because everyone would be panic selling. Russians are lining up at ATMs to withdraw all their money, and lots of Russian banks are likely to go under. So the US and Europe have cut off Russia's central bank. What does this mean? Russia's central bank will be prohibited from undertaking transactions in dollars under a new concerted effort by the United States and its allies, a move that is set to accelerate Russia's economic tailspin. Why does this matter? The measures will severely limit the Russian government's ability to use its $630 billion in reserves to prop up the value of the ruble or fund its war effort in Ukraine. So in anticipation for this invasion, Russia was saving up a lot of money in anticipation that these economic sanctions were going to come, and they were hoping that this Ukraine invasion would go fast, the Ukrainian military would surrender, the government in Kiev would flee the country, they would gain control very fast. So they were smart enough to save up a little bit of money, but Western banks are now basically throwing sand in the gears of Russia's financial system, and they're not even going to be able to use this money to basically prop up their own economy to get through the economic sanctions that are coming. So Russia's central bank has just hiked their interest rate to 20% in an emergency move. Prior it was at 9.5, they just increased it to 20. Now why would they do this? Just think about how panicked US investors are that basically our interest rate is at 0 and it's about to go to 1%. So the ruble is collapsing, which is causing runaway inflation in the Russian economy. Raising the central bank interest rate in Russia is the only way to prevent the kind of runaway inflation that you might see in countries like Zimbabwe. So this is what's happening to the Russian currency, the Russian ruble. It's only going to get worse. Additionally, as Russia's isolation grows, China hints at limits of their friendship. In my previous video, I talked about the Chinese-Russian relationship, and prior to the Olympics, Putin traveled to Beijing and notified Xi what he was planning. He told President Xi, hey, I'm going to invade Ukraine. This is something I really want to do. However, I'm certain that Putin gave President Xi certain guarantees that as soon as we go in, 48 hours of shock and awe, the Ukrainian military will surrender, the government in Kyiv will be either captured or they'll flee the country. I will have complete control of this country and situation within a week, 7 days tops. So what did China agree to? China agreed to what Vladimir Putin promised him, that this was going to be a quick and easy, decisive victory for the Russian military, not a messy, protracted, bloody conflict. So the only country in the world that hasn't, significant economy that hasn't imposed sanctions on Russia or cut Russia off is China. But if Russia can't gain control of Ukraine within the next 2 weeks, pressure is going to be growing on Beijing. Why? Why are you helping this guy? Why are you helping Russia when they're making you look bad? So Xi's patience, Xi's tolerance for Putin has a time limit. At some point, if Russia cannot once again gain the upper hand in Ukraine, I think the Chinese are going to turn on them. So once again, lots of articles coming out that the Russian economy is spiraling into a deeper crisis as the full effect of the sanctions are now taking impact today. You can see the pictures and videos of people in St. Petersburg, people in Moscow, lining up outside of banks and ATMs to pull all their money out. A lot of these banks are going to fail. Now, if it was just the United States imposing sanctions on Russia, perhaps Russia would be able to withstand them, but it's a death by 1,000 cuts. It's an aggregate combined force of most people living on the planet who are upset with Russia for invading Ukraine. And public perception, day by day, is getting worser and worser for Russia. So think about, once again, just all the chaos and confusion for Russian business and Russian merchants that must be going on. Here's a news article, Russian cargo ship seized in the English Channel. It is suspected of belonging to a Russian company that is currently on a sanctions list by the EU. So once again, the EU, the United States, anybody who has imposed sanctions is going to start seizing Russian cargo ships. What's that going to do to Russia's supply chain woes? U.S. governors order state-run liquor stores to stop selling Russian vodka. This is just a funny headline. Obviously, I don't know how devastating this will be for the Russian economy, but putting out Russian vodka is part of Russia's national pride and their soft power and their image. I had to Google, how much do they do in vodka exports, and they're only third in the world with 149 million. Sweden exports more vodka than Russia, which is kind of embarrassing for Russia. Next article, Ukrainian sailor reportedly tries to sink Russian oligarch's yacht. I would do it again. So this guy's a badass, but for the Russian elites, the Russian millionaires and billionaires, the children and grandchildren of these oligarchs, they don't spend most of their time in Russia. They spend most of their time in other international cities like London, Paris, Vancouver, New York, or they just hang out on their mega yachts in the Mediterranean. So the fact that Ukrainian or people sympathetic to the Ukrainian cause are now sabotaging their property, sabotaging their vacations, potentially even poisoning their caviar. This is something that all of the Russian oligarchs now have to be paranoid about. Once again, it's just about resisting the Russian power structure in the world until Vladimir Putin capitulates and withdraws from Ukraine. Okay, so we had some fun with some Western media article headlines. Let's now switch it to RT News. This stands for Russia Today. This is directly paid for, sponsored Kremlin propaganda. This is their English language news site. And I check this every day, and even their propaganda is struggling to come up with positive news stories for how this war is going for Russia, guys. This is really bad. So here's an article from RT News. Russian military confirms casualties in Ukraine. A small number of Russian soldiers also end up captured by Ukrainian forces. So yes, the Russian military has suffered casualties. Russia is confirming. But you can go on Twitter, you can go on Facebook, you can go on YouTube, you can watch these videos of Russian planes and helicopters being shot down, Russian tanks being destroyed, Russian soldiers surrendering, stating they don't know why they're there. Additionally, this is a really sad and depressing story, but Russia has sent mobile crematoriums to Ukraine to conceal evidence of casualties. So I imagine they're dual purposing these mobile crematoriums. If they kill Ukrainian civilians, they're probably just going to burn the bodies, destroy the evidence. But additionally, once Russian soldiers' lives are lost, they don't want images of those bodies and dead Russian soldiers getting back to Russia. So I'm sure the order is to immediately dispose of the body, just burn it, cover it up. Once again, the Russian people can't know how horribly this war is going. Next article, U.S. tells citizens to consider leaving Russia immediately. This is because the EU, Canada, the United States, Australia, almost everyone is closing their airspace to Russian aircraft. So if you are a U.S. citizen currently in Russia for whatever reason, you're going to have a very difficult time getting an airplane flight out of there. You're going to have to drive or take a train. Additionally, Russia might declare a state of emergency. If the ruble and their economy collapses, they might close the borders and not let anyone leave, not let anyone leave with their money. And this is pretty interesting because a lot of the Russian oligarchs and their children and their grandchildren, who are all billionaires and millionaires, a lot of them already have dual citizenship. They already have gotten a lot of their money and assets out of the country. Here's an article about how South Florida sees a boom in Russian birth tourists. So every year, hundreds of pregnant Russian women travel to the United States to give birth so that their child can acquire all the privileges of American citizenship. They pay anywhere from $20,000 to sometimes more than $50,000 to brokers who arrange their travel documents, accommodations, and hospital stays. So these are Russian anchor babies as oligarchs and The Russian elites want dual citizenship. In the event, they got to flee the country and get their money out, which is probably what they're all doing right now. Next RT article, hundreds arrested over Moscow anti-war protests. Once again, as daily life for the average Russian becomes interrupted from the economic fallout, more and more Russians are going to be asking the question, why? Why did our government, why did our military invade Ukraine? Once again, Putin did a terrible job explaining this to his own people. UK to lead efforts to kick Russia out of Interpol. Once again, this is just a death by 1,000 cuts, making Russia a economic, political, and social pariah in Europe, just completely isolating them wherever they possibly can. Next article from RT, Olympic officials recommended total ban on Russia and Belarus, Belarus being Russia's basically only military ally. And this is happening to artists and performers and athletes who are Russian. They are all being told you cannot compete, you cannot participate, you must go home to your country, once again, until Russia pulls out of Ukraine. Next article, EU to ban RT and Sputnik. We're on RT News right now, guys. Sputnik is their radio broadcast. So the European Commission president announces block-wide ban on Russia media outlets. Once again, this is Russian propaganda paid for directly from the Kremlin. I read it to be skeptical and kind of laugh at it. But yeah, this has also happened in Australia, potentially even here in the United States. I might lose access to this website if it's taken down or blocked potentially by United States internet service providers. Additionally, here's a Yahoo Finance article. Russia demands Google restore access to its media YouTube channels in Ukraine. So there are YouTube channels putting out Russian propaganda, and Google, YouTube has taken them down for people with IP addresses in Ukraine. So thank you, Google. I really appreciate what you did there. Next article from RT, Denmark to allow citizens fight in Ukraine. Copenhagen has said that Danes are free to contribute directly to the military conflict between Russia and Ukraine. So obviously NATO and NATO governments are not going to get involved in Ukraine, but if Danish citizens or Irish citizens or German citizens want to go to Ukraine, what is the legal status of those people entering an active war zone? Apparently Denmark is saying to their citizens, legally there's no repercussions from our government if you choose to go fight. I imagine other European countries, as this continues, will also give a protected legal status for people that want to go into an active war zone. Here's a big one, guys. Turkey restricts Russian Navy access. Situation in Ukraine has escalated into a full-blown war, Turkey's top diplomat has said. So what does this mean? So part of the reason why Russia really needed to take Crimea is because their naval fleet basically operates out of this Sevastopol. I don't know how to pronounce that. And the Black Sea Russian fleet can only access the Mediterranean and the Atlantic by going through this canal through Istanbul. Istanbul belongs to Turkey. Turkey is a NATO partner. So if NATO cuts off the Russian Navy from having access to the Mediterranean and the Atlantic, that is, I don't know, that's pretty aggressive. That's pretty hostile on the part of NATO. But isn't it their right? Aren't they the ones who strategically control this, this gateway to the Mediterranean for the Black Sea? That's kind of a scary prospect, guys. Kosovo asks for permanent U.S. base and NATO membership. Once again, just going at the strategic objective that Russia states it wants. It wanted to prevent Ukraine from joining the EU. It wanted to prevent Ukraine from becoming a NATO member. And by invading Ukraine, they're only going to precipitate that event. That event will now happen sooner as a result of Russia's military invasion, and other Baltic states and states from the former Yugoslavia, like Kosovo, they're now asking for permanent U.S. military presence and NATO membership to protect themselves from a future potential Russian invasion. That, like, it's just such a catch-22. How can RT News not even put the pieces together and say, oh, we caused this? Next one, here we go. European Commission head says EU wants Ukraine in. So Ukraine wants to join the EU, Ukraine wants to join NATO, and now what's to stop us back? European Union was preventing this possibility because they didn't want to upset or trigger Russia, but Russia just lost all of their bargaining chips. Russia just lost their leverage by going full-scale invasion. So a strategic blunder, start to finish. Russia has completely, messed up the bed. I don't know, guys. This is going to continue developing, unfolding day by day, and the longer it takes for Russia to admit it made a huge mistake and completely pull out of Ukraine, this is only going to just spiral and spiral, get worse and get worse. We'll continue talking about it in future videos. If you guys enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up so the algorithm knows it's good. Also, leave me a positive, if you're positive, comment or question down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, take care.